Roger raised the issue of social science and the fact that it's disputed, and I think for a lot of ordinary people, beyond the legal arguments and beyond the societal arguments, it comes down to how is this going to affect my kid. Is there social science coming out of Wake County? Has that been in effect long enough to answer the questions, how does this affect academic achievement for both the lower income children who are going to majority middle class schools, and conversely, what impact does it have on academic achievement of the middle class kids who are going to a school that is, say, 40% lower income, as opposed to a school that's only 10% low income?
Right. There is some preliminary evidence. In Wake County, as in other places, the socioeconomic experiment is a fairly new one. They adopted the program in 2000. But the early research is very promising. So when you compare low-income and African-American students in Wake County as opposed to other big counties in North Carolina where they haven't dealt with concentrations of poverty, the low-income and African-American students do substantially better. So you have about 64% passing of low-income students passing all their end-of-course exams as compared to about 50% in these other districts, or less than 50% in many of those districts. So did it solve inequality as a whole? No, but those students are doing substantially better. And the really heartening news for this program politically is that the middle class kids in Wake County are doing very, very well. There was no negative effect on the achievement of middle class kids. So now that's just one place, but it's consistent with research going back many, many years finding that low-income kids will do better in middle-class schools, but that so long as you don't put middle-class kids into very high-poverty schools, the middle-class kids will continue to do well. And arguably they're becoming much better citizens as well, exposed to an amount of diversity that will strengthen them.
And then, Roger, I had a question for you, and this comes out of something that Ted said. If your argument prevails, does that preclude doing anything at all about racial inequality in the schools?
No, of course not. The most obvious kind of law that I favor that addresses racial inequality are the laws that ban discrimination, and that ban people from being treated differently, some better and some worse, on the basis of race or ethnicity. So certainly if a school district was treating students differently, was underfunding schools because they were predominantly African American, or was in any way treating African American students differently, less favorably than white students, that's the kind of discrimination that I think can and should be attacked. And I see no problem with addressing socioeconomic inequalities. And when you address socioeconomic qualities, that means that you are, de facto going to be addressing racial inequalities, since there are proportionately more poor African Americans in this country than there are poor whites. But I don't think that it makes sense to justify a program that's designed to help poor people by making it racially exclusive. By saying that, well, if you're white, we're going to assume that you must be rich, and that if you're black, we're going to assume that you must be from the ghetto. If the idea is to help socioeconomically disadvantaged people, it should help all socioeconomically disadvantaged people.
Ted, would you like to respond?
I certainly do. If you parse through what you've just heard and think about what I said, which is that if you follow Roger's argument to its logical conclusion, he and his compatriots would ban legally and constitutionally all voluntary and conscious efforts to address racial inequality. His answer reflects exactly what I said. What he said just now was that he would be against discrimination that can be intentionally proven. That's basically what he just said. We all agree on that. And he said that he is in favor, I think he said he's in favor of class-conscious remedies. By the way, to be clear, I also support efforts to address economic status inequality. I do not think one is a substitute for the other. They are not identical. Race and class are not identical, although there is a strong overlap. And just to be clear, the canard that Roger just threw out with respect to discriminating against poor white people is just that. I think that poor and working class people of all races in this country get the short end of the stick, and we need to address the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And nobody, including the Legal Defense Fund, and certainly I, support discrimination against poor white people or anybody else on the basis of race.
That's not true.
So I want to be clear about that. Well,
I mean, you may not, but there are lots of programs that are closed to poor white people simply because of their race.
We can have that discussion, and it goes to the core of what he constitutes as discrimination. And I would welcome that discussion. I joined that discussion. We've had that discussion in other places, and if you'd like it, have it, I'll have it right here.
Well, let me just ask Roger one other question. Do you have a problem with wealth integration? In other words, if you have a school district where there are predominantly lower income children in certain schools and middle class children in separate schools, do you have a problem with a voluntary program but that has numerical targets using wealth as the criterion?
Well, I certainly don't have a legal problem with that. I mean, I think Rick is right that a program that assigns students on the basis of wealth and income and socioeconomic status is not unconstitutional and does not raise the kind of historical and moral and constitutional problems that racial discrimination does. Do I support it as a policy matter? I think it depends. I think this is why we have federalism, is so that we can experiment with different systems. I have to say that I'm not an expert on this, but my general presumption is that neighborhood schools work best, for a variety of reasons. And that whenever we start moving away from assigning students simply to the schools that are the closest to them, I'd have to be persuaded that the benefits of those kinds of assignments are going to outweigh the costs. And I think that whether the benefits outweigh the costs is going to vary from school district to school district. It will depend on how far the students are having to be bused, how many students are having to be bused, how great the income inequalities are in a particular area, all these other things. And I don't have a one-size-fits-all policy for that.
Pat, as someone on the local level, what do you think about neighborhood schools being the best solution?
Well, first of all, Kathy, I would like to respond to several issues that our esteemed lawyers have raised. And again, just as a simple practitioner, speaking only from my community perspective, let me again share with you some data. Quite frankly, we find it a bit vexing, this argument. Which came first, race or class? To us, it is, in my community, the chicken and the egg argument, and here is why. At the elementary level of the African American children enrolled in the Jefferson County Public Schools, 83% of them are on free and reduced lunch, which is our yardstick for determining poverty. At the middle school level, the African American children that are enrolled are 79% of them are on free and reduced lunch. And at the high school level, 89% of the African American children are on free and reduced lunch. Overall, that means that 78.7% or 79% of the African American children enrolled in the Jefferson County Public Schools are on free and reduced lunch or poverty. In my community, whether we are keeping our schools desegregated by race or by class seems like a moot argument.